Hello, and welcome to my final installment, the series on big data. Today's case study is called Data Services at Armistead, and it's by Bradley R. Allen. So, Armistead Insurance Company was a large established firm. They had been operating for 30 years or more. They had the state-of-the-art operating infrastructure. Many enterprise systems were in place, such as Oracle and other infrastructure systems. With this, they wanted to take advantage of what was in place and find a profitable use for something they were calling the third shift. So they had broken their computing into shifts, and while the first two shifts were at capacity, there was a third shift that was just a large block of idle time where the systems could be being used but were not. An important caveat to wanting to use this third shift, they didn't want to create delays and mess anything up with the other two shifts. So they decided to establish a subsidiary, and the name of the company is Data Services Inc. The objective of Data Services is to provide services to the fast food industry, and this is the infrastructure that we've been discussing in class, so data processing, information storage, and custom reports. Data Services was hyper-focused on sales. For the most part, they billed customers on a monthly rate, but they did provide discounts and other payment structures. It was not necessarily uniform. So the question this case study proposed was, should Armistead, the parent company, continue to invest, and is Data Services well managed? We kicked off the case study reading that they were operating at a loss and they were not necessarily doing what Armistead had set out to do. So, what was their problem? Obviously, there were some issues with the Data Services Inc., and it was pretty ironic that this company, who's setting out to increase efficiency, increase productivity, while at the same time reducing operating expenses and labor costs, was internally having trouble figuring that out with their own workflow. There is a lot of expenses associated with big data and the hardware component. It's just a very, very costly setup, costly to deploy, as well the processing and the delivery of reports. This is not a cheap industry. So people are kind of coming out and they're buying these services because they likely cannot set them up in-house. At the same time, how can Data Services really take advantage of some of Armistead's already in place infrastructure and start being profitable? An interesting piece was their travel policy. They actually focused a lot on new clients and visiting new clients to precipitate a sale. They focus 75% of their top management's time on generating new sales, and the case study cited that they got 14 new customers. So while this is good, there there should just be a question of, uh, is this the best use of top management's time? Are these newly generated clients, um, worth all of the time and energy that management is taking to make these people clients? Um, could they be using their time in a better way? Could we be managing our human resources better? The case study talked about a competitor. They said there was only one direct competitor in the space, and while they had similar rates, they were owned by a company in the fast food industry. So this was interesting because Armistead is owned by an insurance company. So the company owned by a fast food industry is providing those data services uh, for their company first and foremost, and they're kind of learning on the job as they go. So if they see something that's working, um, if they see something that's not working, they're really experiencing it firsthand. One of the executives in the case study said that um, data services not being in the fast food industry was actually an advantage, because they were able to just kind of maybe not fit a structure and just go out and do what they think is best. I was actually kind of conflicted on that point. It might actually be more helpful to kind of go through and see what's working, especially when it's your bottom line. When you're providing someone services, maybe you're not getting the full story. Um, so it's just very important, and they really need to think more about creating a balance in their company and return on investment. So that leads me to my takeaways. They need to begin to establish best practices and procedures. There were parts, including travel and other systems, that they said they didn't necessarily have a set sales procedure, and they really should try to put something in place just so they don't continually misuse time. The billing, I think, was another piece. They could try to normalize that there was all this talk about giving people discounts, but they also said the competitor had similar rates. Do they need to be discounting their rates? Just something to look at in order to make a profit. There were a lot of appendixes that kind of showed the amount of revenue generated from these clients and offering these services, and the amount of cost to actually provide the services to them. And I think that just really displayed that they need to be leaner. They need to make a less expensive option as far as the services part, and increase the amount of profit per client. So just making better use of the third shift. There was like a reluctance to schedule processing in advance, and that absolutely needs to change. They need to better foster client relations. Once you have a client, it is actually very important to keep them, because you've just spent all this money up front generating the new client, and now you need to probably visit that client more. Could some of the travel policies be shifted to existing clients, or just to find a balance versus you visit them a bunch in the beginning and then less so once they are a client? There was another piece that said they were charged for customizing the infrastructure systems, and maybe just to be more focused and sell a product, and not just make all of these sales and say, oh, we can do everything, but to, say there are limitations and not incur those those costs from corporate. And there was finally a small piece that said they manually did things, and it is always helpful to automate your business process. So we made it to the end. Thank you very much for listening to my series on big data. And yes, it was a nice semester. Thank you very much, Professor.